Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shub, and together with my partner and co-host Patric, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Hey, Patrick. So our intro says we are a podcast about the built world, although I think in recent memory, we take liberties with the interpretations of, we've been taking liberties with what that might mean. And I think this one we'll probably also, I guess, stay somewhat on topic, but also maybe take it in a different direction. And I think it was a very interesting topic you suggested this time around.
Yeah, so an operator's topic, and the topic being, what does my engineering organization of the future actually have to look like to take full advantage of AI, to let go of any legacy mindsets, legacy cultures, legacy routines and habits, etc. And I think that's something that, honestly, Shub, I don't think anyone, any founder, any company has that figured out. I think we're all figuring it out right now. So that's an interesting question.
Yeah, and I think of all the many topics that might be considered topical, I feel like this is one of those things where it is topical and yet it feels like we're truly in the midst of something so interesting where there's also an opportunity to kind of swim in real time with the tide and figure out where the tide is heading. So I think we've had some reflection, some primary data to share as well, which I thought might be interesting to reflect on.
So then I suggest the following in real time, Shub. Why don't we structure it in a way where we first talk about maybe three things. First, talk about the ideal organization that we're seeing with regard to also how specifically with regard to how you organize engineering. Then secondly, there's a specific new type of profile in engineering that you and I really like. And then the third question is, okay, what is now my head of engineering doing in the future? What does such a person look like and how to recruit such a person? So how about we go with these three topics?
Let's do that.
Okay. Do you want to talk about org or want me to?
I can get started with a jargony start because I'll be the loose one in this.
Make it grounded. I see.
Yeah, I'll be the loose one in this episode, and I'll let you help us with the details of it all. So, look, I think, for example, and I think you and I are of a vintage that can appreciate this. There was a time when companies and startups would pride themselves on calling themselves internet-enabled. Or they would say, hey, we are a consumer internet company or something like that, right? Or a mobile app company, for example, right? I think there's also this trend where certain companies now differentiate themselves by calling themselves AI native firms, right? And I think my hypothesis is just like there is no such thing as an internet-enabled company and a non-internet enabled company, right? Similarly, I don't think there is a non-AI native company or a place for a non-AI native company, especially if it's being created new today. And therefore, I think with that mindset, the entire organization needs to have an AI native mindset and an AI native readiness in terms of how it goes about interacting with different functions and creating various things. Maybe let me pause here. I don't know if that's enough of a high-level loose talk.
I just want to make sure. Did you hear like that huge shout and cry from outside? No, you didn't hear it, right?
Okay. I did not. Was that shout like complaining about the jargon?
No, maybe a group of people getting slaughtered. Nothing out of the ordinary. Okay, so but that's why I was looking a little bit confused at you. It was not about what you said. Yeah. So. Maybe specifically, the kind of organization that I think is one very probable candidate for being a winning AI-enabled organization is one where you separate two functions of your business and you literally also separate engineering across the two. So I like organizations, and I see them shipping like crazy, when you have a run the business part of the organization and then a transform the business part of the organization. The one avid listener that we have knows that we have been citing many times before that the reason why unicorns don't become decacorn many times is actually that scaling isn't the same as compounding. For compounding, you need an opportunity that actually can allow you to absorb more and more optionality left and right, but you also need an organization that can continue to take bets. And that is very hard to do because organizations ultimately need two modes: run the business and transform the business. And the same person will struggle to do both things because the optimization parameters are completely different. If you ask a VC to take a bet and you ask a VC to, at the same time, optimize the portfolio for steady cash flows, what do you think will happen? It's target conflict. And the same thing happens to every person that works in an incumbent organization. And there are technology companies that are incumbent organizations, like Salesforce would be an incumbent, Netflix would be an incumbent, et cetera, et cetera. So asking the same person to make your business at a certain scale very reliable, dependable, steady cash flows, high efficiency, efficiency as in labor cost efficiency, efficiency as in capital efficiency, investment efficiency on the bets that you're taking. That is run the business. And when you give a person in your organization, forget team, forget department, forget the highest aggregation level. If you give that goal to a person, they will become schizophrenic and they can't do it. And that is a fundamental reason why organizations continue not taking bets. It's, in my opinion, the fundamental reason for Clayton Christensen's innovator's dilemma. My observation of 20 years. Now, in startups, people think, it's so easy to take bets. Yeah, initially, yes. But what if you actually do succeed? What if actually you do have 1 million customers? What if the 1 million customers now depend upon you? You know what you have to build? You have to run the business next to it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Ultimately, your business, even if you start bet taking, will have to have run the business. If you're a run the business organization today, you better figure out how to continue more bets. And these are two separate parts of your organization. That's what I'm saying.
I couldn't agree more. I think look at all of the best companies around us. They've institutionalized bet taking. In some cases, it's more visible. In some others, you can see what those I'm talking about the largest companies by market cap. They all are in industries today which even just a few years ago, maybe 5-10 years ago, it was inconceivable that they would be market leaders in those segments.
I would argue that Lockheed Skunk Works was the original example of a bet-taking factory. Honda has a big research organization. I'm not sure how they operate today, but it used to be a very strongly cited case study 10, 20 years ago, where they were very, very free to take technology bets, actually far away from automotive Shub. So it was much more like a NASA-like research organization.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure if they have it again, etc. But these are bet-taking factories. And so if you want to actually build a lasting organization that can grow fast, continue to compound, and deliver in a stable scale, I posit you need the run the business part of your organization, and you need it separated from the bet-taking part of your organization, which means in an org design, for an operator, the org design that I really gravitate to and that I like in the age of AI is that literally you create a bet-taking factory. And Revolut, Nick there, has done exactly that. He has created a founder's office, but next to the founder's office, he has literally created his crazy bets team. And these guys are tasked with identifying big opportunities and then bringing them to a point where they can be launched, and even slightly beyond that. I would argue Uber did the exact same thing. When you think about Uber's organization to launch into new geographies and launch new products in existing geographies, it was a bet-taking organization that was resourced with very specific profiles of people and very playbook-like. You know who was another OG of this? Rocket Internet. Rocket Internet was exactly like that. So I say you need to have both parts of the organization, but you need to have the bet-taking factory. And this is the fundamental conflict to a startup, the way that we teach operators typically. Operators typically think, yeah, my whole organization needs to take bets. All of them need to be great, founder material at the highest level. That's the kind of people I want. Do you? Do you really? Or do you want to have a run the business part of the organization? That, of course, is agile, that is AI enabled. So I'm not saying these should be boring people that couldn't run at your speed with your intensity. They need to be. But do you want them to take the bets? Or do you want to have a specific, special, like bets taking factory that you want to take the bets? That's what I think should be done.
I couldn't agree more. And yet, Patrick, for whatever reason, it's very rare to see such constructs in startups. I mean, I was about to say early stage startups, but I would say all startups. It's very rare to see such org structures.
I mean, you do see them in the ones that keep compounding. I'm not sure if Airbnb is organized like that, but we know that Uber, Revolut, Rocket was. One that we are very familiar with that is not currently public is organizing themselves from day one exactly that way. I'm sure if you ask more operators, more examples will come to light, but I'm also sure it's like 0.1%.
Or less, yeah.
So I think that's one, right? So organize between run the business and then transform the business. Put your bet takers in a separate bucket, not because you don't want them to collaborate, you do, but because it's a different mission. So then the next question, topic 2, becomes, okay, what are the people in the bet-taking factory, Shub?
Yeah, I mean, are you asking, what sort of personas we're talking about?
What do you gravitate to?
I'm thinking by nature, since we're talking about bet-taking as an institutionalized job function, we're talking about folks who either have already done such things, again, to speak VC jargon, 0 to 1 stuff in perhaps environments which feel completely random. So where you're simultaneously having to discover things from scratch, learn about new business models, new environments, new markets, as well as immediately trying to stress test those models and even launch it. All of those things compressed almost in parallel workflows. That's kind of the skill set you'd be looking for. Now, the way I have defined it, I would imagine if you truly, in a disciplined fashion, apply this filter, that automatically eliminates the vast majority of professionals who might think they are a fit for this. And there's not too many who actually fit this description.
Yeah. And I have a very specific type of profile that I isolated. And all the operators out there, I think this is actually a bang-on fit for all organizations, all startups that are not research-bound. So if your bottleneck is actually deep tech, this will not be the kind of person that you need. But if your bottleneck is not deep tech, I think this is the kind of person that you will really like. So I'm saying, go for commercial AI engineers. That's a new jargon I just invented, Shub. You're welcome. And
nice.
the way I define commercial AI engineer for your bet-taking factory is it's a person with a STEM, including computer science background, mathematics, physics. I've seen nuclear engineering, computer science, of course, very, very important in this one. Mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. So STEM, including computer science as a background. Sort of the undergrad and maybe the first 1, 2, or 3 years of your professional career. However, the second important characteristic here is they didn't work the majority of their professional life as a software engineer. So this is very counterintuitive. But instead, they work the majority of their professional life as in commercial project functions. So let me first define majority. So if you have a person that is like 3 years of experience, all of it, commercial project functions. If it's a person that has like 10 years experience, maybe 3 years software engineering, 7 years commercial project functions. And then the more you go, you want that ratio of commercial project functions to be larger and larger and larger. Make sure they are not computer scientists, software engineers that just happen to have had a little bit exposure into commercial project functions. So that's what I mean by majority. What do I mean by commercial project functions? Very easy. So they need to have worked in high intensity, high pressure commercial outcome roles. So that is RevOps and growth. That is launcher roles. So launcher roles is literally the way you would be called in an Uber organization, or in a Revolut organization, they will have an equivalent term. Investment roles actually is very, very good if it's an intense environment with extreme high numbers of revolutions. That also works. And the likes. It can also sometimes be like a commercial project manager, etc. And then the final, the king or the boss of this category of commercial project functions is the founder. If you can actually get a founder with a STEM CS background to join your bet-taking factory, that's also oftentimes a really cool one. So let me, again, commercial project function can be investing, RevOps or growth, can be launcher roles, can be founders, or another type of like high pressure, high outcome commercial project function. So when you get these kinds of people with a STEM CS background, but the majority of their professional career was spent in commercial project functions, what you get is a person that can now be a 70% good coder. By 70%, I mean they probably wouldn't have shipped software before AI, but with AI and Claude Code, they can ship software and automations at an absolutely insane clip, more than the non-STEM, non-CS enabled person. In many cases can. Of course, there are exceptions, and there are people who have trained themselves very well, etc. So I am taking shortcuts here, and I'm giving you a cookie cutter here. So they will be able to do that, but at the same time, they can actually ship the commercial outcome extremely quickly. So that can be a feature that you want launched, a new product that you want launched, a new service that you want launched, an internal new software module that you want launched. All of that is at an insane shipping velocity if you have such a commercial AI engineer with such a background. Now, there is a caveat to this, which we will discuss in the third agenda point. But this is what I really like as a profile for that. And we have been seeing immense results the last quarters with these kinds of people.
Yeah. And I think this is, I guess, perhaps our audience was wondering, hey, we started off this episode by saying how the engineering team is meant to be reconceptualized in the, I guess, the era of an AI native firm. And perhaps audience was wondering, hey, where are we going with this?
Where's the engineering team here? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think this is the cool thing where I think everyone, or at least a much larger part of the organization today, is de facto, directly or in a semi-direct way, also part of the engineering team, but they work in it in a much more, I guess, in the trenches manner. That's how they deploy the engineering.
You're making a very good point, and I want to double underline this because the implication of this is really important. When you don't build your organization that way, you have the typical interfaces that we all hated. You have the interface engineering to product, and you have the interface product to commercial. Putting commercial AI engineers with this background into your bet-taking factory in the organization, you have eliminated both interfaces. You have eliminated the engineering product to commercial interface. And that is the key reason why the shipping velocity is insane.
I couldn't agree more. So with this in mind, Patrick, so where does that leave, I guess, the more traditionally defined engineering role or engineering function?
So I mentioned a key risk, and I think that's the perfect segue. So the key risk that more and more founders and startups are realizing in the last few months in their organizations is when you still have a traditional or engineering team. And some of them are very, usually what happens is that many companies will have like early adopting engineers that are like, they completely AI enabled themselves. But then they will also have a portion of the engineering team which is a bit slower to adopt, a bit more not necessarily suspicious, but they have ways of working, they have routines that have worked for them, etc., etc., etc. So that is something that you need to transition over. And what you will then notice is actually that when you do transition them over, the superpowers that AI gives them, the longer you apply them, you build an archipelago of individual routines and individual solutions. And that archipelago, to use another metaphor, is creating spaghetti. And now you need to tie the spaghettis together. So that's sort of a transition we're currently seeing in the market. By currently, I literally mean like last 6 to 12 months of results as you try to transition a traditional engineering setup into let's all AI enable, and then the superpowers make everyone not necessarily do their own thing. They still, of course, work in conjunction. They create results that in the business context all work together. But everybody has their own style, and that means everybody starts creating interfaces, create different, separate tooling, separate ways of working. That's the downside when you transition and you want your engineering function to become fully AI enabled. Now, what that means is that actually, and now we're tying it entirely to the previous 2 points, in our view, you actually shouldn't have a large engineering team that ships a lot anymore, but rather the engineering function that you want is highly AI leveraged, because its job now becomes provide 3 things to your bed factory, to the commercial AI engineers. Provide tooling, so as in, okay, this is the stack that you're supposed to use, this is the tools that you can use. Then provide the interfaces, provide the APIs, provide the MCPs, all of that. And then the third thing is make sure that whatever they deliver back to you has been using the tooling and the interfaces, but the application layer, the modules, the components that they build for you, now your job as engineering is to make sure they become boring, they become dependable, they become scalable. You tie them all together and there's no archipelago of solutions. And you increase your chances that you can actually do that as engineering by giving them the standards, by actually making them use your tooling and your infrastructure and your interface. And I think that's the core thing.
The weird thing, and this may sound like a bit of a tangent, it almost sounds like what, say, someone 5-10 years ago might describe as how decentralization of finance or DeFi, took disparate random silos of financial workflows and made it more uniform, where it was embedded across different aspects of society, and it democratized access to it. It also almost feels like, in some ways, the engineering function is now more of a, I guess, standard creator and standard bearer, but the creation part of it is more decentralized and diffused across the organization.
So I think that's right, but I also think that's perhaps not the most efficient way of doing it. Now, I do think that you run the business part of the organization, your boring, dependable, scalable part. All of them need to work with AI, all of them. And all of them need to use the infrastructure and tooling interfaces that you give them, but they don't necessarily have to invent a bold bet or a new feature, etc. So that part I would just caution. Don't make your entire organization do that. Let them use AI to do their thing, but the big bets, different part. So in that sense, there's decentralizing, but not the bet-taking part of it, I would say.
And with this, I guess, rewriting of what the engineering function means, right? What does that mean in terms of the persona you're looking for?
So this is fascinating. I read this from a VC friend the other day that shared it with their portfolio, and they shared it with us too. And I strongly resonated with it. So they had done it wasn't a survey, it was more of a taking inventory kind of assessment over the last few months, where their portfolio companies had struggled with engineering transition, had succeeded with engineering transitions, what kind of profiles, etc. And the TLDR that they came out with is, hey, actually for the engineering part, so they by the way, they didn't discuss the organization that we did. They didn't discuss the commercial AI engineering. So they had an assumption that engineering would always be engineering. That I disagree with. But within that logic, they identified that, hey, actually there are two types of traditional software engineers or specialized software engineers, not commercial AI engineers, that work. And then there's a cohort of engineers that struggle across their large portfolio and observations. The one that struggles, let me start with that they said, is the type of engineer that has 5 to 15, 18 years of experience. I mean, I'm sure they're simplifying, etc. But the observation was, hey, these people are not so fresh out of uni that they have already absorbed as part of all of their work the new stack. But they're also so inexperienced just yet, oftentimes, to anticipate how an architecture can evolve, how it can be reverse engineered with extreme clarity and certainty, and how then to that architecture you replace all of your human agents with coding agents. Which means that they actually saw in their portfolio two other profiles truly succeed, where this one struggles. So the engineers that they saw actually deliver the most insane ROI was the ones with 20 plus years of true software engineering experience. And they are the ones that completely adopted coding agents and are the ones that feel freed up from people management. So literally there are quotes where people tell you, I'm glad I don't have to manage people anymore. They didn't do anyway what I wanted. I had to do this, that, and the other. With the agents, I still have to do that, but I don't have to communicate as much. I don't have to do people management as much. They don't ask me for a bonus. They don't ask me for a performance review. I can have 5 to 8, 10, I don't know if anyone has 10, agents running in parallel. It's the same thing, just better. That's the mindset of that person with 20 years of experience when you have that foresight of infrastructure and architecture in university. The other one is coming fresh out of uni, because basically through the uni, they have already made it part of the stack, and they are already fully AI enabled. There's no transition there. Now, of course, there's lack of experience, and that comes with other problems, but that was their observation. I have to say, Shub, I don't know what you think. I would love the 20 years of experience. I think that's going to be the rarest and highest ROI kind of capability in the market. I mean, isn't that ironic to a degree?
It is, and look, I think you and I, we've also spoken to a few of these folks who fit the descriptions that you just spoke of, and it's actually quite fascinating that normally one would think from the outside in that if engineering and technology product development has evolved into this sort of stratified function, that folks will also see that as a source of, I guess, if not fulfillment, a source of, I guess, power or whatever, that they get to protect their own domains and so on. But I think for the most part, the best folks, especially ones who've seen multiple cycles, they also see that as getting in the way of things happening quicker, of them being a more organic and real time part of the rest of the organization. And if you're honest with ourselves, quite often that is also a perception that's crept in over the years, that hey, there's all the other functions, and then there's the tech and engineering, which is a separate function. They do their thing, sort of aspect to organization building as well. And I think it's interesting, a lot of the things we've discussed, as well as the persona we are talking about, it actually puts the onus back on the both the engineering people as well as the person leading that function to actually not be stratified, to actually work in conjunction with everyone else, and to sort of homogenize or direct the engineering function the way an orchestra master would direct a symphony, right? Rather than kind of do everything by themselves or get caught up in the act of doing. So, and the other interesting thing, I agree with you that a lot of these folks are bogged down by people management, but in a weird way, this new reality also means that what you need or what these people are looking for, and what the age of the new head of engineering person is not necessarily a good people manager, but a person with good interpersonal skills, because you have to go back to just dealing with people outside of the engineering domain, because it sort of free flows more readily.
I would agree with that. Yeah. It's, I would really like to know if the organization that we're describing is sort of the Palantir organization. I think I have certain inklings, certain concepts of it, but I can't really say. It sounds to me like they're parallels.
It might be. I wish I knew more, but from the outside in, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some aspects of it that have been embraced by Palantir. Yeah.
So we saved one topic for the last. So this kind of head of engineering that you described, what would be your process of hiring them?
So I think the process would be to actually I would do the opposite, in the sense the traditional process would be dig really deep on technical skills, keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, etc. I would flip it around a little bit. I would actually start with testing interpersonal skills, the ability to work, both be an individual contributor, but also be working in a team. And when I say working in a team where they're the only engineering person
to start with,
right? And exactly. And I think that, now on the surface, it may sound like a straightforward enough definition of what a startup team looks like, but it's not that straightforward to find people like that, especially when you apply the filter that you did, Patrick, of people who have seen multiple cycles with more years of experience.
So you start with a like almost management case study. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, management and resource constrained exercise. Because what you're also imposing is, hey, you don't get to be a people manager.
So then the second step after that would be to expose them to part of the commercial AI engineering function?
Exactly. That's right. Because that is where you would test the free flowing of information, how fast the shipping can happen, because what you want is rapid repetitions and quick, the opportunity for lots of reps to happen as the product gets developed and shipped.
And then testing the technical capabilities of a person with that amount of years, I at least think you need someone of a similar standing. So this will be constrained for many people, but if you have access to an absolute world-class CTO that would be so kind to do 1, 2, or 3 technical interviews for the advanced candidates for you at this stage, absolutely do it.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think at either during the process, it came up how you're thinking about your organization and the commercial AI engineering. And by the way, you shouldn't be an empire builder here at the beginning. Maybe it's just you on engineering, etc., etc. So if all of that came up already, great. But if it didn't, and it was sort of implied, then I think final step of the process is that you're actually aligned on these foundational principles, because it's a very different world now compared to what this person would have experienced the last 20 years. And it's also quite different. But if they then agree with it, like vigorously agree, and they feel excited, then you found your person.
Yeah, 100%.
Amazing. Yeah, I think great operator tips. Certainly what you and I believe in.
Absolutely. Very nice. I think this was a nice change of flavor, change of pace for us in this episode. Enjoyed it,
Thank you,
Patrick.
sir. I did too.
Awesome. I'll see you soon.